A tense courtroom standoff begins with an open insult that exposes deep prejudice. Detective Rick Hanlon flaunts his badge like a shield, but the woman standing before him, Amara Lewis, doesn't flinch. A single disrespectful remark ignites a storm that no one in the room expects. By the end, one line from Amara turns the entire room's air cold, hinting she's not who he thinks she is. People like you don't belong on this side of the bench. The words drop like acid in the cramped county courtroom. The old ceiling fan rattles overhead, pushing stale summer air across cheap wooden benches where a handful of spectators whisper behind cupped palms. Rick Hanlon adjusts his tie, a smug grin crawling across his clean-shaven face as he leans back, thumb flicking the shiny badge clipped to his belt like a gold-plated toy. Sunlight spills through narrow windows, throwing bars of dusty light on the scratched floorboards. The judge's seat sits empty, late as always, leaving the air thick with anticipation. Court clerks tap at keyboards, pretending not to listen. A bailiff leans by the door, eyes flicking from Rick to the woman. Standing in front of him, Amara Lewis doesn't blink. Her suit jacket is pressed, her hair pulled back in a low knot that says, "I don't flinch." Her eyes, dark and steady, lock onto Rick's. There's no visible anger, just a cold, watchful calm that makes the people around them shift uncomfortably in their seats. Rick lets out a short, ugly laugh. "Look at you, standing here like you run the show. Tell you what, sweetheart, when this is done, I'll buy you a bus ticket back to wherever you people come from." A cough from the back row breaks the silence. The bailiff shifts his weight, one hand brushing the grip of his holstered gun. Rick watches him, then turns his grin back to Amara. She lifts one hand, slow, deliberate, and pulls a folded piece of paper from her leather folder. The paper trembles slightly in the humming fan breeze. She places it on the table between them, tapping it once with her index finger. Her nails are bare, filed short, practical, professional. Rick's smile twitches. He doesn't read it. Instead, he reaches out and flicks the paper onto the floor with the back of his hand. It flutters like a wounded bird, landing near Amara's polished shoes. "Oops," he says, shrugging. "Guess you dropped something." A murmur moves through the room. An old man in the second row mutters to his wife, "This gonna get messy." Amara bends down, picks up the paper, and straightens so slowly that for a second the whole room seems to hold its breath. She slips the paper back into her folder, eyes never leaving Rick's face. He leans closer, breath scented with stale coffee. "And ego. You people should learn your place. I've been doing this 20 years. No one touches me." Amara's eyes flick once to the gold badge pinned to his belt, the same badge he's touched 5 times already, as if reminding everyone it makes him untouchable. There's a subtle shift in her shoulders. Calm, unbothered. She takes one step closer, close enough that Rick's grin falters when he notices the silence swallowing the room. No more whispers. Just eyes on him, and her. She reaches into her pocket again. Not for paper this time, but for a small, battered photo. She holds it up between 2 fingers so only Rick can see. His eyes dart down. For the first time, something flickers across his face. Surprise, doubt, maybe fear, but it's gone before the others can register it. He scoffs, but the edge in his voice betrays him. "What's that supposed to mean? You think you scare me. With pictures?" Amara's lips part just enough for her voice to slip out like a blade. "No, Detective Hanlon. I don't need to scare you." She folds the photo, tucks it back into her folder, and brushes an invisible speck of dust off her lapel. She lets the silence stretch, makes him feel every eye in the room crawling across his shiny badge, his sweaty upper lip, his false calm. "You think your badge makes you untouchable. she says, her voice low but sharp enough to cut the stale air in two, but you brought the wrong woman to court. A hush so heavy it presses the squeaking fan to a halt in everyone's mind. The bailiff's knuckles tighten on his belt. A clerk's fingers freeze mid-dash keystroke. Rick tries to laugh, but it catches in his throat. He swallows, but the smug grin doesn't return, not fully. He opens his mouth, maybe to fire back, maybe to remind her of who's really in control. But the courtroom door swings open with a bang that rattles the benches. The judge steps in, robes billowing like a dark cloud, eyes landing right on Rick, then Amara, then the silent spectators holding their breath. Amara doesn't look away. Her eyes are locked on Rick's, and as the judge's gavel cracks, the silence. Her faint smile hints at something no badge can save him from. Rick? Hanlon pushed the heavy courtroom door open so hard it slammed into the wall behind it. The echo bounced down the narrow hallway, drawing curious eyes from clerks and junior lawyers perched on benches. Folders clutched to their chests like shields. He hated this hallway. Too bright, too narrow. Everything white and beige and buzzing, with bad fluorescent light. He tugged at his tie, feeling sweat prick at the back of his neck. The badge clipped to his belt felt heavier than usual, dragging at his hip like a secret he couldn't hide anymore. He heard it, the whispers. Soft, sticky, impossible to pin down. A young clerk pretended to fiddle with the copier but side-eyed him as he passed. Two suited men by the water cooler leaned closer together, speaking in low tones until he glared at them. They looked away. "Get back to work," he snapped, his voice cracking the hush like a whip. The taller man muttered a quick, "Yes, sir," but neither moved. Rick kept walking, past cracked ceiling tiles, past the peeling notice board where faded Justice for All posters curled at the corners. He reached the end of the hallway. A dead end really, with only a dusty vending machine humming, beside a locked fire exit. He slammed a fist against the cold metal of the vending machine. The stale candy bars inside trembled but didn't fall. He wanted to break the glass, feel it shatter under his knuckles. Instead, he dug in his pocket for change. Anything to feel in control. The coins clinked down the slot. A chocolate bar dropped with a hollow thunk. He tore it open and bit down hard, jaw working furiously as if he could chew up every rumor and every pair of eyes that dared to watch him. A cough behind him. He spun around so fast the candy wrapper fell to the floor. A young intern, maybe 20, pale, awkward, stood there holding a stack of files so big it hid half his face. "Sir?" The boy's voice wobbled. "Detective Hanlon? The judge wants you back inside when you're ready." He said it's not optional." Rick stepped forward. The intern shrank back, pressing himself against the wall. Rick could see his own reflection in the glass of the vending machine. Wide eyes, clenched jaw, sweat shining on his forehead. "You got something to say, kid?" Rick asked, voice low and rough. The boy's eyes darted to the candy wrapper on the floor, then back up. "No, sir. Just the judge. He looks upset." Rick snorted. "He's always upset." Nothing new. But even he didn't believe it. This time, he knew the judge had always looked the other way, trusted Rick's word, let him bend stories just enough to close cases and clear the streets. Now that same judge had stared at Amara like she was holding a loaded gun. He couldn't see. The intern slipped away down the hall, shoes squeaking. Rick stood there, a half-eaten candy bar melting in his hand. He wiped his palm on his slacks, the stain dark and sticky. Behind him, a door opened with a soft click. He didn't have to turn to know it was her. He felt it, a sudden chill, the quiet that fell over the hallway like a dropped curtain. He turned anyway. Amara Lewis stood there, one hand resting lightly on the wooden frame, folder tucked under her arm. Her eyes flicked once to the candy wrapper on the floor, then up to Rick's face. She didn't smile, didn't frown. She just looked. You really think you can scare me with gossip? Rick barked, voice echoing too loud. Amara didn't flinch. She stepped closer, each click of her heels measured and calm. When she stopped, they were just far enough apart for Rick to smell her faint perfume, lavender and something sharper underneath. Like iron. I don't need gossip, Detective Hanlon, she said, her tone as steady as a gavel striking wood. I just need the truth. It does most of the work for me. He laughed, sharp and hollow. You think they'll listen to you? Over me? You think this place runs on truth? Amara tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle piece she'd already solved. It runs on fear, but fear shifts. People talk when they think the walls are about to crack. She moved past him, the brush of her sleeve ghosting against his arm. He turned to watch her walk down the hallway, calm, upright, unbothered. She paused once to nod at the same two men by the water cooler. They nodded back. One of them turned, his back to Rick. When she reached the end of the hall, Amara looked over her shoulder. Her eyes locked on Rick's badge, then met his eyes. One corner of her mouth lifted, just barely. The courtroom's waiting, she said softly. Try not to stain the floor on your way in. Then she disappeared through the doors, leaving Rick standing alone in a hallway that suddenly felt too narrow, too bright, and too damn quiet. Rick Hanlon sat at the witness table, shoulders squared, eyes darting between the judge and the small audience that now seemed bigger than it was. Every cough, every shifting bench, every whispered note scratched at the back of his neck like a nail. The courtroom felt colder than it had minutes ago. Maybe it was the hum of the old AC unit rattling against the far wall. Or maybe it was Amara's calm presence at the other table, pen gliding across her yellow legal pad as if she were writing something more permanent than truth, like a verdict. Judge Avery Langford, old but sharp, peered down at Rick over half-moon glasses. His gavel rested within arm's reach, but he hadn't touched it yet. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, elbows on the bench, watching Rick the way a hawk watches a rabbit that's convinced it can't be caught. The court reporter sat hunched over her stenograph, nails tapping keys in a rhythm that made Rick's temples pulse. Every word he said was etched into the permanent record. Every slip, every twitch, every carefully chosen half-truth, locked in black and white forever. Detective Hanlon, the judge began, voice dry as parchment. You understand you're under oath? Rick forced a tight smile. Of course. Your Honor. Amara's voice cut in, smooth and clear. I'm sure Detective Hanlon knows what an oath means. Rick's head snapped toward her. She hadn't looked up, still writing. Just 3 words, but they buzzed in the air like a hornet. He opened his mouth to fire back, but the judge's raised eyebrows shut him up. Amara finally lifted her eyes. Pen poised above the pad. Detective, let's revisit the night of April 17th. You claimed you stopped Mr. Willis because of a broken taillight, correct? Rick sat up straighter. That's right. Standard traffic stop. And you remember everything about that night clearly? Her tone was polite, almost gentle, but her eyes didn't blink. Double quotes, yes, I remember it. Amara tapped her pen once against her pad, the click echoing in the tense room. And you filed your report within 24 hours? Of course. Rick's mouth felt dry. He swallowed, eyes flicking to the clerk typing furiously. She flipped a page. The rustle of paper seemed louder than the distant hum of cars outside. Can you read this line for the court? She held up a copy of his own report. Rick leaned forward, squinting at the neat black letters. Subject exited vehicle aggressively. Refused to show license. Reached for waistband. Appeared to be armed. Amara nodded. And you stand by that? Yes. He hated how defensive it sounded. Too fast, too clipped. She paused as if weighing whether to go on. Everyone knew she would. She always did. Detective Hanlon, did your dashcam record this interaction? Rick's fingers drummed once on the table before he caught himself. It malfunctioned. Technical issue. Amara tilted her head slightly. So you're telling this court that the single camera meant to verify your version failed that night? A ripple of whispers from the benches. Judge Langford raised a palm but didn't shush them. He wanted them to hear it. Rick cleared his throat. That happens sometimes. These systems are old. Amara's smile was small, almost polite. Of course. And your partner, Officer Greer, where is he today? Rick's jaw tightened. Medical leave. Convenient. She didn't say it like an accusation. More like a statement of weather. Calm, factual, unavoidable. Rick leaned forward, voice dropping low, trying to reclaim an ounce of control. Counselor, I don't know what game you think you're playing, she interrupted, still gentle. No game, detective. Just facts. She turned to Judge Langford. Your Honor, the defense would like to enter into Record Exhibit B, footage from a nearby convenience store security camera that shows Mr. Willis being pulled from his vehicle at gunpoint with no aggressive exit. A heavy hush. Rick felt it settle on his shoulders like wet cement. The clerk wheeled over a cart with a monitor. Amara clicked a remote. The screen flickered to life. Grainy black and white video filled the courtroom. Rick's squad car. Door flung open. Him and Greer dragging a startled man onto the asphalt. No sudden movement from the driver. No waistband reach. No weapon. Just a man, confused and scared, hands up. The judge leaned back slowly, the old wooden chair creaking under his weight. Detective Hanlon, care to explain this discrepancy? Rick's mouth opened, but the words jammed in his throat. His mind scrambled. Excuses, explanations, blame, but nothing fit. Amara didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She just sat there, pen resting across her folder, eyes locked on Rick like she was already seeing past him to something bigger, darker, about to crack open. And for the first time, the badge on his hip felt more like a target than a shield. Rick Hanlon's knuckles turned white around the edge of the table. The courtroom's stale air pressed against his collar, every eye in the room drilling into his badge as if they could see straight through the polished brass to the grime underneath. Judge Langford drummed his fingers on the bench, slow and steady, each tap like a countdown. The old man's eyes didn't blink as they pinned Rick in place. Detective Hanlon. The judge's voice was calm, too calm. Is there any reason your sworn statement directly contradicts this footage? Rick's mouth opened, words fumbling for order. Your Honor, the angle. The camera doesn't show everything. Mr. Willis was non-compliant. He might have reached. Amara's pen scratched across her pad again, slicing through. His excuses like a quiet blade. She didn't look at him as she spoke, voice crisp. Detective, you stated under oath that Mr. Willis exited aggressively. Would you like the court to replay the video? Rick's eyes flicked to the monitor. Still frozen on his squad car, the time stopped blinking. Every pixel seemed to glare back at him. He could feel sweat collecting at the base of his spine, soaking into his pressed shirt. No, he snapped, his voice cracking through the hush. There's no need to replay it. From the benches behind him, he heard it, the quiet stir of shifting alliances. A pair of uniformed officers near the back exchanged looks, their badges glinting under the dusty sunlight. One leaned toward the other, whispered something behind a cupped hand. Rick knew those whispers. He'd used them for years, to plant fear, to steer stories, to bury mistakes in hushed backrooms and late-night calls. Now they turned on him, echoes of a loyalty that cracked under the weight of evidence too clear to twist. Amara lifted her eyes to the judge, ignoring Rick entirely now, like he'd already shrunk. Your Honor, The defense has submitted an official request to unseal the internal affairs files related to Detective Hanlon's previous stops. We believe there's a pattern. Rick shot up from his chair, palms flat on the table. Objection! That's harassment. She's fishing. The judge raised a single finger, silencing him without a word. He turned back to Amara. Ms. Lewis, do you have sufficient grounds for that request? Amara didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor, and the footage proves the need. There are other stops with malfunctioning dash cams. Similar reports. Similar language. The court should decide if that's coincidence. A ripple ran through the rows of observers, low, uncomfortable. Rick's eyes darted to the far corner where Captain Doyle, his old mentor, sat stone-faced. Doyle had been with him through raids, traffic stops, backroom favors. They'd buried screw-ups together more than once. Doyle wouldn't meet his eyes now. He just sat there, one knee bouncing, jaw clenched, hands clasped so tight his knuckles gleamed. Rick's chest squeezed. If Doyle turned, if he testified, or worse, stayed silent, everything could crack wide open. Rick forced a laugh. It sounded foreign in his own ears. Your Honor, these claims are baseless. She's trying to smear a decorated officer's name over one misunderstanding. Amara's pen tapped twice. She didn't smile, didn't blink. It's not your name I'm worried about, Detective. It's the truth this badge has been hiding. She leaned forward then, voice lowering enough that people leaned in without meaning to. Do you remember her name, Detective Hanlon? He frowned. Whose name? Tanisha Green. A pin could have dropped and echoed like a gunshot. Somewhere in the benches, a young reporter scribbled faster, her pen tearing through her notepad. Rick's chest tightened. He felt the room tilt under him. This has nothing to do with. Amara's eyes didn't soften. 2 years ago. Traffic stop. Dashcam malfunctioned. Minor record. She never made it to the station. Objection. Rick barked, voice hoarse. But the judge didn't raise his gavel. He only watched, eyes heavy with a weariness that smelled like reckoning. Rick's mind raced. Backrooms, sealed files, statements rewritten, captains nodding that they'd take care of it. He felt the shape of every lie like a bruise. Under his ribs, Captain Doyle shifted in his seat. Rick caught it, the way Doyle's jaw tightened before he looked away. A lifetime of favors unraveling in a single flick of his eyes. Amara closed her folder softly, the clap of paper echoing through the suffocating air. Detective, you can hide behind your badge if you want, but it's the people behind you should worry about. Rick felt it then, the courtrooms. Cold weight shifting, not in his favor. Not anymore. For years he'd been the hammer that nailed every threat into silence. Now he was the loose nail, trembling under the judge's steady stare. Judge Langford leaned back, voice low but clear. Court will recess for 15 minutes. His gavel struck wood, sharp, final, ringing in Rick's ears like a warning bell. As Amara gathered her papers, she didn't even glance at him. She didn't have to. The silence spoke for her. And it said one thing clear as day. The old guard was cracking. Rick pushed through the courthouse. Double doors like a man clawing for air. The hallway beyond was hushed, just a thin carpet and stale coffee scent standing between him and collapse. For years this hallway had been his domain, a place where a word in the right ear, a nod in the shadows, kept the wheels greased and the secrets buried. But today the air felt brittle. Even the flickering fluorescent lights seemed to flicker in time with his heartbeat, fast and uneven. He spotted Captain Doyle standing near the water fountain, shoulders hunched, whispering something to a pair of uniformed officers. Rick's pulse jumped, an instinct older than his badge. Doyle had always covered for him, cleaned the mess when things got complicated. Doyle owed him. Doyle. Rick's voice cracked down the hallway, sharper than he meant. The officers froze. Doyle turned, his face carved in exhaustion, eyes glassy like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Rick, you should keep your voice down," Doyle said quietly, nodding at the lingering court clerks pretending not to listen. Rick stalked up, ignoring their eyes. "What the hell's happening in there, Doyle? Since when do we let some rookie liar drag us through the mud like this?" Doyle gave a humorless laugh, the sound brittle as dry leaves. "She's not a rookie, Rick. You'd know that if you'd bothered to check who you were picking a fight with." Rick leaned closer, breath hot, finger jabbing Doyle's chest. "I picked a fight with a mouthy defense liar, that's all. Now you're gonna let her open my files? Drag our names through the press? You think that's gonna end well for any of us?" One of the young officers behind Doyle, Martinez, bright-eyed and fresh out of academy, shifted uncomfortably. His hand hovered near his radio, like he was ready to call someone. Or maybe record. Doyle's eyes flicked at Martinez, then back at Rick. "Watch your tone. We're not in your squad car, Rick. We're standing under a courthouse roof." Rick laughed, but it came out wrong. Bitter. Too loud. "I made you, Doyle. I saved your ass more than once. You owe me." Something in Doyle's expression cracked. The older man leaned forward, voice low enough that the hallway had to strain to catch every word. "You think I owe you because I turned my head when you planted that knife? Because I signed that report without looking at the dashcam logs? Rick, you owe me." Rick's throat went dry. Martinez's eyes flicked between them, wide. Doyle didn't back down. He stepped closer, enough that the smell of stale coffee and menthol gum curled in Rick's nose. "You think this badge makes you untouchable? She's not playing your game, Rick. She's rewriting the rules while you're still trying to roll the dice." Rick grabbed Doyle's sleeve, voice sharp. "Don't you dare flip on me." "You do, and I swear to God." Doyle yanked his arm. "Free. Save it for the stand, detective." Rick turned, trying to regain control. Martinez stood stiff, eyes glued to the floor. But Rick could feel it, the heat of words unsaid burning through the young cop's lips. Rick stepped toward him. "You got something to say, Martinez?" "Huh? You got a problem with the way I've done my job?" Martinez swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing. "No, sir. Just following orders." "Yeah?" Rick sneered. "Good. Remember that when they drag your name through the mud, too." Martinez didn't answer. Instead, his hand slid into his pocket, pressing something. A phone? A recorder? Rick's gut twisted. Doyle clapped Martinez on the shoulder, then turned back to Rick. His voice was calm, but it hit harder than any shout. "Maybe you should. Ask yourself who's really going to be standing next to you when this comes down." Doyle turned, guiding Martinez down the hallway. Rick stood there, pulse hammering, breath ragged. Behind him, a soft click of heels on linoleum. He didn't need to turn, he knew who it was. Amara stopped beside him, not close enough to touch, but close enough to make the walls feel smaller. She spoke softly, eyes on Doyle's retreating back. "Funny thing about secrets, detective. They don't stay buried when the walls start talking." Rick glared at her, but his voice betrayed him with a quiver. "You think you've won? One tape, one mistake. It's nothing." Amara's eyes flicked to his badge, then back to his face, calm, unwavering. "It's never just one mistake. And it's never just one tape." She stepped around him, leaving him standing in the hallway he used to own, where every whisper suddenly sounded like a confession he couldn't stop. Rick watched her go, each step an echo he couldn't silence. The courthouse records room smelled like old ink and stale air, a tomb for secrets people believed would never wake up. Fluorescent bulbs flickered overhead, humming softly like they were whispering every lie the walls had swallowed over the years. Amara sat at a medal Table near the back, sleeves rolled to her elbows, stacks of boxes around her like pillars in a crumbling temple. Her fingers moved steadily through yellowing reports, manila folders marked confidential in faded red stamps. Each file was heavier than paper had any right to be. Each page carried a name, a date, a traffic stop, a malfunctioning dash cam. A report that always read the same. Subject resisted. Subject appeared armed. Subject did not survive transport. Amara traced a fingertip over the name. Tanisha Green. A girl with a petty theft record, never convicted. Stop 10 minutes. From home. No weapon found. A mother still leaving flowers at a cracked sidewalk. Behind her, the records clerk, a balding man with thick glasses, lingered, trying to look busy. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, Detective Hanlon requested access to these same boxes. Last night, said he needed to check old evidence logs. You want me to log that too?" Amara didn't look up. She flipped to the next page. Another name, Luis Mendoza, 17, no dashcam footage. Her voice stayed calm. "Log it. Make sure you note the timestamp too. And send a copy to the judge's clerk." The man hesitated. "You think he'll come down here again?" Amara closed the file softly. "I think he's already on his way." As if summoned by her words, the metal door at the far end creaked open. Rick stepped through, his shadow long under the harsh ceiling light. He looked less like a detective and more like a man who'd been standing in a storm without an umbrella. Hair mussed, eyes darting, tie loose around his neck. The clerk maid. Himself small, ducking behind a shelf of dusty microfilm reels. Rick's shoes squeaked against the floor as he approached. Amara didn't stand. She didn't even shift. She waited, letting him close the distance until he loomed over the table. Eyes flicking to the open file. "Tanisha Green. You think you're clever?" Rick's voice was a low growl, meant for shadows. "Digging up every piece of dirt you can find? You think this changes anything?" Amara turned a page, ignoring the heat of him towering over her shoulder. "It already has." Rick slapped, a hand down on the folder. The sound echoed off metal filing cabinets, made the clerk flinch somewhere behind the shelves. "You think anyone cares? You think a few old names are going to bring me down? You know how this works, Louis. No camera. No witness. Just my word." She looked up then, eyes calm, voice softer than his anger deserved. "But you made a mistake, detective. You left your word in too many places, and words pile up." Rick leaned closer, breath sour with stale coffee and something rotten underneath. "You're gonna ruin your own career trying to bury me. They'll come after you too. The unions, the brass. Nobody wants these old ghosts dug up. It's bad for everyone." Amara's fingers rested on the folder. She didn't move them. "Maybe, but it's worse for you." Rick's laugh cracked around the edges. He lowered his voice to a hiss. "You don't get it, do you? The the captain, the judge, they don't want this mess. They'll bury you right next to your files if you push too far." Amara's reply was just a whisper, but it sliced deeper than any shout. "Then let them try." She pushed the file gently across the table until it touched his hand. Her eyes didn't waver. "Read it. Look at what you wrote. Every signature. Every lie." Rick stared at the paper as if it might burn him. His name, scrawled in confident pen strokes years ago, glared back at him now like a trap he'd set. For himself, he jerked his hand back as if the folder were poison. "This is nothing." Amara closed the folder and slid it into a fresh box labeled Exhibits Pending. She marked the box with a thick black pen, "To court." Rick stepped back. He looked at the stacks behind her, boxes upon boxes, each one a piece of the fortress he'd built. Now each box was a window, each page a ghost. He turned for the door, muttering curses under his breath. His steps echoed, too fast, too loud. The clerk peeked out from behind the shelf. "Ma'am, should I lock these up?" Amara shook her head. "No, leave them here. Let him see them every time he comes through that door." Sometimes ghosts work better when they're not hidden. She didn't watch Rick leave. She didn't need to. The papers spoke louder than he ever could, and for once, they were telling the truth. The bar off Madison and Fifth had no name on the door, just a single flickering neon beer sign that sputtered like it was too tired to stay lit. For 20 years, this back room had been Rick's safe harbor. A place where dirty laundry stayed folded, favors were traded like poker chips, and loyalty was thicker than the stale beer that soaked the carpet dot tonight. The air in the back room was thicker than usual, smoke from Doyle's cheap cigars coiling around the battered ceiling fan. Rick sat at the head of a cracked wooden table, a half-empty glass of whiskey sweating beside his elbow. Around him, men in loose ties and loosened belts leaned back in mismatched chairs, the ghost of last week's hush money still clinging to their suit pockets. Captain Doyle sat across from him, sleeves rolled to his forearms, rings of sweat darkening his shirt. Two lieutenants, Harris and Blake, flanked him, both avoiding Rick's eyes. Rick slammed his palm down on the table, rattling the ashtray. "She's gonna drag us all through the gutter. You really gonna sit there and do nothing?" Doyle didn't flinch. He took a slow drag from his cigar, eyes half-lidded as the ember glowed in the dim light. "Lower your voice, Rick. You're drawing flies." "Flies? You think I'm the one stinking up the room? That lawyer's making a show of us. Me. We shut this kind of noise down before. Sealed files, missing tapes, EA reports lost in the shuffle. You telling me you can't handle one rookie in a cheap suit?" Blake cleared his throat, voice cautious. "She's not a rookie, Rick. She's got the press sniffing around. If we stonewall her, we bring more heat than we can manage. This ain't the old days." Rick barked a laugh, sharp and humorless. "The old days? The old days are the reason you're wearing that badge, Blake. Or did you forget who got you that Officer of the Year plaque when your little traffic stop went sideways?" Harris shifted uncomfortably. His fingers drummed on the table. "We know what you've done for us, Rick, but it's not just her. Internal Affairs is asking questions. They got new eyes on old paper. You know how it goes. Once they sniff blood," Rick cut him off, voice low and venomous. "There's no blood if we stay shut. That's the deal. We hold the line. We always have." Doyle leaned forward, elbows on the table, cigar parked between two fingers. "Listen to yourself. Hold the line? You think these kids out there, Martinez, Ellis, the new batch, you think they're gonna ruin their pension for your mistakes? You think they'll lie under oath when there's a camera in every pocket?" Rick pointed a finger at him. "Don't talk to me like you're clean. I know every file you've buried, every backroom favor you called in. We did this together." Doyle's eyes flicked to Harris and Blake, a silent warning that made them shift like dogs who just heard thunder. "Yeah, we did. And maybe that was the mistake." The room went quiet. The old wall clock ticked loud enough to measure each heartbeat. Rick's fingers drummed the table, then stilled. He leaned back, forcing calm into his voice. "So what? You gonna cut me loose? Let me take the fall while you all pretend you didn't feed off the same dirt?" Blake swallowed hard. "No. One saying we're throwing you to the wolves. But maybe you take the hit for this one. Keep it contained. Give them a name to chew on." "That's how this works, Rick." Rick's laugh cracked like glass. "You want me to be the fall guy?" Doyle's silence was answer enough. He stubbed his cigar out in the ashtray, watching the smoke coil up like a ghost leaving the room. Rick's eyes darted around the table. Men who'd once called him brother now wouldn't meet his gaze. The brotherhood had always been built on quiet nods and unspoken threats, but fear only held as long as nobody else was watching. Now the lights were on, and every shadow on his side looked ready to scatter. He pushed back from the table, the legs scraping against ticky carpet. "You're making a mistake. If I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. Files, tapes, phone. Calls. You think she's good at digging? I'll hand her the damn shovel." Doyle's eyes hardened, voice dropping to a tone Rick had heard once before. The night they agreed to bend the truth for the first time. "Don't threaten me." "Rick, you don't scare me anymore." Rick stared at him, at all of them. Old friends, old debts, old sins now staring back like cracks in the foundation. He grabbed his coat off the back of his chair, the whiskey glass toppling and rolling off the table, liquid soaking into the carpet. He didn't bother picking it. Up out at the door, he turned back. For a heartbeat, he wanted someone, anyone, to stand up to say, "We got you." But no one moved. He slammed the door so hard the neon sign outside flickered once, then went dark. Precinct basement always smelled like mildew and old fear, wet concrete floors, rusty pipe drips, the low hum of the ancient HVAC rattling through the ceiling. Rick hunched his shoulders as he stepped through the narrow corridor, footsteps echoing between yellowed cinderblock walls. It was past midnight. No footsteps overhead. No chatter of dispatch. Just the soft buzz of flickering bulbs strung along a cracked ceiling like a dying spine. He paused outside the evidence locker, staring at the dented steel door. The sign above it read "Authorized personnel," only a rule that had never applied. To him, not once in 20 years. Not when he needed to tuck a bloody knife in a back drawer. Not when a misplaced file needed to vanish. Not when a tape needed to disappear. Rick slid a stolen keycard from his pocket. The plastic was cracked, borrowed from an officer too green to question him when he'd asked. The lock beeped, then clunked open, the door swinging inward on squeaky hinges. Inside, rows of metal shelves sagged under boxes stamped with names that had no voices anymore. Dust motes floated in the pale overhead light like tiny ghosts. Rick's breath fogged in the stale cold. He found the box on the third shelf from the floor, an old case number from 7 years back. Green. T. He yanked it down, the cardboard. Soft at the edges, fingerprints smudged over faded black marker. He flipped the lid. Inside, a handful of reports, a sealed bag with a cracked cell phone, a burnt orange cassette tape in a clear evidence sleeve. His throat tightened at the sight of it, that stubborn piece of plastic that refused to die. The dashcam footage. That wasn't supposed to exist. The one Tanish's mother never stopped asking about. The one that made him wake in cold sweat some nights, seeing her eyes in the rearview mirror. His hands trembled as he ripped the tape out of its sleeve. For a second he just stared at it, a worthless relic in the age of cloud storage yet, so heavy it could crush him if Amara got her hands on it. Rick slipped it into his coat pocket and pulled a lighter from his pants. The tiny flame danced, wavering as if even the air down here didn't want this moment to happen. He crouched in the corner, shielding the flame, ready to turn the plastic to curling black ruin. But a soft noise froze him, a faint click behind. The rows of shelves. Rick snapped his head up, eyes darting. He held his breath, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the pipes, the faint creak of old steel. Maybe the building settling. Maybe his mind cracking at the edges. He hissed air through clenched teeth. "Pull it together, Rick." The lighter flicked again. The flame touched the edge of the tape's plastic shell. It warped, a thin wisp of toxic smoke curling up. But just as the flame licked at the label, a voice cut the dark. "Need help with that, detective?" Rick jolted so hard he dropped the lighter, the tiny flame snuffing out as it clattered across the concrete. He spun around. Martinez stepped from behind the shelves. hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched like he was just out for a stroll. His eyes, though, they were sharp as broken glass under soft lamplight. Rick's heart hammered so loud. He wondered if Martinez could hear it echo through the metal shelves. "What the hell are you doing here?" Rick barked. Martinez shrugged. "Same thing you are, I guess. Looking for answers." His eyes dropped to the half-melted tape in Rick's hand. "Or trying to erase them." Rick's voice dropped to a snarl. "You got no idea what this is, kid? Walk away, now." Martinez stepped closer, ignoring the warning in Rick's tone. "Funny thing, I think I do know. You think you're the only one who can keep a secret down here?" Rick felt sweat break on his neck despite the basement chill. "You wearing a wire?" Martinez spread his arms wide, empty hands. "No wire, just a message." Rick stiffened. "From who?" Martinez's grin was faint but clear. "From the person you didn't see when you looked behind you. From the person who figured out your game before you knew you were playing it, Amara." He didn't need to hear her name. He could see her eyes behind Martinez's grin, calm, steady, unblinking. Martinez nodded toward the tape. "She already has the digital backup. You think that was the only copy? You trained me better than that, detective." Rick's stomach turned. His fingers went slack. The half-burned tape clattered to the floor between his boots. Martinez stepped around him, squatted down, and scooped up the ruined plastic with a gloved hand. "Don't worry, we'll keep this for the record. Chain of custody and all." Rick tried to find the right threat, the old bark that once froze rookies in their tracks. But the words caught in his throat, strangled by the soft squeak of Martinez. Resealing the evidence bag. The younger officer's eyes flicked up. "Doors are getting heavy, detective. Pretty soon you're going to find out they don't open for you the way they used to." Rick lunged forward, but Martinez slipped sideways. Clean and practiced. The door clanked shut behind him, leaving Rick alone in the cold basement, staring at a half-burned ghost that refused to die. Upstairs, somewhere, he knew Amara was waiting, and the tape that didn't burn was already on its way to the judges. Bench. The courtroom hummed like a nest of hornets. Every seat filled, every eye locked forward. Local reporters lined the back wall, cameras slung at their hips, notebooks balanced on knees. The bailiff stood stiff near the door, hand resting on his holster, not because he expected trouble, but because he knew it was already here. Rick Hanlon sat at the witness table, a bead of sweat crawling from his hairline down past his collar. He didn't bother brushing it away. He just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched so tight it made his temples throb. The tape, that cursed sliver of plastic, rested on the prosecution's table, tagged and bagged. Next to it, a small digital player waited, its blinking blue. Light like a heartbeat in the hush, Amara stood tall behind her desk, notes stacked in neat lines, her pen still and silent for once. She didn't look at Rick. She didn't have to. She had the floor now, and every whisper of paper shifting in her hands was louder than Rick's heartbeat pounding in his ears. Judge Langford leaned forward, glasses perched low on his nose. His fingers drummed the gavel's handle like he was testing its weight. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Lewis, you may proceed." Amara stepped forward, smooth as ever. She didn't posture, didn't raise her voice. She just let the silence carry her words. "Your Honor, Exhibit F is the dash cam. Recording recovered from the April 17th stop. Despite prior claims of a malfunction, this tape clearly shows the actual interaction between Detective Hanlon and Miss Tanisha Green." She pressed a button. The courtroom lights dimmed just enough for the small monitor to glow bright. A soft click, then static. Then, voices. Step out of the vehicle. Rick's voice, harsh and sharp through the old mic. "I didn't do anything, officer." Tanisha's voice, young and shaking. A nervous breath. "Step out now." Hands. Where I can see him." The courtroom seemed to lean forward, drawn closer by the ghostly echoes. Rick felt his knees itch to stand up and yank the player from the table, fling it against the wall, grind it under his heel. But he didn't move. The video crackled on, the hollow clunk of a car door, the shuffle of sneakers on pavement. Then, the scream, short, sharp, a scuffle. Rick's voice again. "Stop resisting, stop resisting." The sound of a blow, muffled but clear. The silence that followed was worse than any shout. A murmur rippled through the room, disgust, disbelief. Pity. A woman in the second row buried her face in her hands. A young man squeezed her shoulder, maybe Tanisha's brother. Grown up since the funeral. Judge Langford didn't look at Rick. He watched the monitor until the tape ended in soft static. Then he nodded at Amara. "Anything further?" Amara clicked off the player. The courtroom lights flickered back to their harsh white. She turned to Rick, voice steady, every syllable hitting like a hammer. "Detective Hanlon, is there any part of that recording you'd like to clarify for the court?" Rick's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He could feel his old lines piling up behind his teeth. "I feared for my safety." She reached for something. She matched a description. But the words turned to ash in the dry well of his throat. Judge Langford spoke into the quiet. "Detective Hanlon, answer the question." Rick forced a swallow. It's out of context." You can't hear what she said before," Amara cut in, soft but sharp. "Before you turned the dash cam away?" Rick's eyes snapped to hers. He could see it then, the shape of what she'd built. The paper trail, the old. Ghosts, the tape that didn't burn. He'd spent years telling himself the badge was armor. But here, under the judge's stare, it was just scrap metal strapped to a lie. Langford let the silence stretch like a wire. Then, with a tired sigh, he nodded to the bailiff. "Detective Hanlon, please stand." Rick's legs moved like they belonged to someone else. He rose, back stiff, eyes fixed on the wood grain of the judge's bench. The bailiff's voice, quiet but final. "Detective Hanlon, you are hereby remanded to custody pending further proceedings. Please remove your badge and firearm." Rick's fingers fumbled at his belt. The badge, the polished brass he'd once tapped for special treatment in every diner, every roadside bar, every trembling traffic stop. He set it on the table. The clink of metal echoed in the silent room. No one clapped. No one cheered. The tape had done enough. The truth was enough. Rick looked at Amara. For the first time, he saw not an enemy, but a verdict he'd been running from his whole life. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just gathered her notes, pen in hand, and nodded to the judge. "The defense rests." Rick stood there, hands cuffed at his back as the gavel struck wood, the last echo of a silence that would never protect him again. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon sun beat down on the wide stone steps like it was washing the whole place clean. A small crowd had gathered, reporters with cameras perched on shoulders, families pressed shoulder to shoulder, strangers drawn by the weight of an ending they didn't want to miss. Inside, Rick Hanlon sat at the defendant's table, shoulders squared but hollow. His suit hung off him like it belonged to a bigger man, someone who still believed in the myth of his badge. The courtroom was still, the hum of whispered prayers threading through the gallery. Amara stood behind her table, a single-file folder. Under her hand, the same folder that had followed her from dusty basement shelves to the judge's bench. Her knuckles pressed into the cardboard as the bailiff stepped forward. "All rise for the jury." Rick's eyes flicked up. 12 faces filed in, all of them unreadable. No nods, no glances. Just the blank calm of people who'd carried his fate behind a locked door for hours that felt like years. Judge Langford cleared his throat, voice low but unshakable. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a woman in a navy blouse and sensible flats, stood. She held the slip of paper. Like it weighed a ton. "We have, Your Honor. Please read it." Rick's pulse thudded in his ears. He tried to catch Doyle's eyes in the back row, but Doyle didn't come today. The Brotherhood didn't come. Just him and the badge he'd left on the table days ago, its polished shine now dulled under layers of fingerprints. The foreman unfolded the paper. Her voice never wavered. "In the matter of People versus Detective Richard Hanlon, we find the defendant guilty on all counts." No cheers, no gasps. Just the rush of breath that left Rick's chest like a tire gone flat. He felt smaller than the chair he sat in, his knees pressed together, palms flat on the wood as if he could hold himself upright through sheer will. Amara closed the folder. She didn't look at him. Her eyes were on the bench, the gavel, the walls that had held generations of silenced names. One less silence today. Judge Langford's voice cut through the stillness. "Sentencing will be scheduled at a later date. Detective Hanlon, you are remanded to state custody immediately." Rick didn't flinch when the bailiff pulled him to his feet. The cuffs were already tight on his wrists, steel-biting skin that once shook hands in back rooms and slipped favors across desks. As they led him down the aisle, Rick scanned the rows, for pity, for mercy, for the old nod that once meant "I've got you." There was none. In the back, a young woman in a faded blue coat met his stare. Tanisha Green's mother. Her eyes were tired but dry, her mouth a flat line that neither smiled nor cursed at him. Just the look of a mother who'd carried grief so long she'd learned how to stand without apology. Outside, Amara stepped into the sunlight. The air tasted different, like fresh paper instead of stale smoke. She found Tanisha's mother waiting near the bottom step, hands clasped tight around an old photo, edges worn soft by years in a wallet. They didn't say much. They didn't have to. "He can't hurt her anymore," the woman said, voice rough but steady. Amara nodded, eyes stinging. "No, ma'am, he can't." A camera shutter clicked somewhere behind them. Reporters edged closer, questions ready, sound bites, statements, fuel for tomorrow's headline. But Amara didn't speak to them. She just turned to Tanisha's. "Mother, you ready?" Amara asked. The woman tucked the photo back into her purse. "Been ready a long time." They stepped down together, shoulder to shoulder, past the waiting cameras and murmuring crowd. No microphone could twist this moment. No headline could cheapen it. Rick, half a world away now behind courthouse walls, caught a final glimpse through the window of his transport van, the two women walking out into the sun, free of his shadow for the first time. Inside the van, Rick stared at his cuffed hands. No badge to polish, no whispers left to bury the truth. Just the dull hum of tires rolling him toward a cell he could not talk his way out of. Outside, under an open sky, the verdict echoed. Not in shouts, not in riots, but in the quiet steps of two women who refused to stay silent, and the soft rush of summer wind carrying Tanisha Green's name where Rick's couldn't follow.